the sands of Egypt, silence guarded a secret. Until 1922. The year was 1922, and the desert sun hung mercilessly over the sands of Saqqara. Beneath the pale sky, a team of foreign archaeologists gathered with local workers, their shovels and picks sinking into the earth, where an old shaft had been uncovered. For centuries, whispers had drifted across Egypt, rumors of tombs hidden in the shifting dunes, tombs untouched since the age of pharaohs. Many had searched, chasing both legend and gold, but all had returned empty-handed. Yet here, fortune seemed to bend. The workers struck stone. It was not a crumbled ruin, nor the hollow of an old well. Before them stood a doorway. Its lintel was heavy limestone carved with faint hieroglyphs that, despite centuries of wind and sand, still cut sharply into the stone. The carving spoke of gods and guardians, of a threshold meant to divide the living from the dead. The entrance was half buried, the sand packed so tightly it seemed to resist their touch, as though the desert itself wished to keep its secret hidden. The local men grew uneasy. They whispered among themselves, crossing their arms over their chests as they backed away. One muttered about the shadows of the West. Another warned of the curse of the old kings. Their eyes darted nervously at the symbols etched into the stone. But the archaeologists pressed on. Curiosity, ambition, perhaps even destiny, burned brighter than fear. Torches were lit, the sand cleared, and the seal prepared to be broken. As the first crack echoed against the cliff walls, a strange silence fell. Even the desert wind seemed to pause, holding its breath as if to listen. In that moment, no one could know what waited beyond that door, or whether the tomb was meant to remain sealed forever. The desert night fell quickly, casting long shadows across the camp as torches flickered to life. The stone doorway had been cleared, its surface scraped free of sand. Now, the archaeologists stood in a hushed circle, their breath heavy with anticipation. The air smelled of smoke and dust, a sharp contrast to the faint desert breeze. Two men stepped forward with chisels and hammers. The seal, though centuries old, was intact, thick slabs of limestone fused with ancient mortar. Each strike rang out like a bell, echoing across the dunes. The locals flinched with every blow, their murmurs rising into quiet prayers. They knew the stories. Tombs sealed not just to preserve the dead, but to protect the living. At last, a crack split through the stone. Dust spilled out in a choking plume, carrying with it the dry, suffocating breath of centuries. The torches flickered as if disturbed by an unseen hand. One worker swore he heard a whisper, though none admitted it aloud. With one final strike, the slab gave way, collapsing inward. A rush of stale air rolled outward, heavy and sour, as though the earth itself had exhaled. For a moment, no one moved. The desert had gone silent again. Even the insects seemed to retreat. The archaeologists exchanged glances, their eyes wide, yet gleaming with triumph. Beyond the broken seal lay a passage, descending into darkness. They lit their torches higher, their flames dancing against the newly exposed walls. Carvings, sharper than those outside, lined the stone. Images of gods with jackal heads, serpents coiled around coffins, and figures kneeling in fear. It was no mere resting place. It was a warning. Still, they pressed forward, and with that single step into the dark, They crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. The torchlight wavered as they stepped beyond the shattered seal. The air inside the passage was thick, stale, and unnaturally cold. Every breath scraped the lungs, carrying the taste of stone dust and something older, something metallic, like rusted iron or dried blood. The narrow corridor sloped downward, forcing the men to move single file. Their footsteps echoed against the carved walls, a hollow rhythm swallowed quickly by the black. The carvings deepened as they descended. No longer crude symbols weathered by time, but sharp, deliberate hieroglyphs cut with precision. They told stories of gods with burning eyes, of serpents devouring men whole, of plagues sweeping across the land. One figure appeared again and again, a hooded man with arms outstretched, his face deliberately chiseled away, erased by hands that must have feared even his image. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of unease grew. The torches should have burned steady in the still air, yet the flames bent and hissed as though pushed by an unseen draft. More than one worker swore he felt a hand brush against his shoulder. When they turned, there was nothing but darkness behind them. At the base of the passage, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling disappeared into shadow, its height immeasurable. Stone pillars lined the walls, carved into grotesque figures, half man, half animal, their eyes catching the torchlight as though alive. In the center stood a single stone sarcophagus, its lid sealed tight, untouched by time. The leader of the expedition raised his torch higher, his voice trembling but steady. "We have found it." Yet in the silence that followed, the men could not shake the feeling that something else had found them first.
What do you make of these markings?
I've never seen anything like them. They seem to warn of something.
The chamber swallowed their presence like a tomb within a tomb. The moment the last torchbearer stepped inside, a suffocating silence fell, so complete that even the sound of their own breath seemed too loud. No insect, no distant wind, not even the shifting of sand could be heard. It was as if the desert above had ceased to exist. Their torches revealed more of the grotesque carvings. The pillars surrounding the chamber weren't merely structural. Each one bore the image of a twisted deity, part human, part beast. Eyes carved from polished obsidian seemed to glint and follow the men's every move. Some figures crouched in eternal screams, their stone mouths open wide. Others stood triumphant over rows of faceless figures carved kneeling at their feet. In the center, the sarcophagus loomed like a dark heart, its lid bound by ancient resin and stone clamps. The surface was etched with warnings, hieroglyphs not of honor, but of menace. Snakes biting their own tails, eyes weeping black tears, and repeated words that translated roughly to disturb, not the silence. The leader approached, holding his torch close. He ran a gloved hand across the carvings, dismissing them as superstition. Yet even he hesitated when the torchlight caught a fresh detail. Scratches gouged into the stone as though by fingernails. A worker dropped his tool suddenly, the clatter echoing unnaturally loud. Every man froze, staring at the sarcophagus as if expecting it to stir. But nothing moved. Only silence answered them, heavier now, pressing against their ears like the weight of the earth itself. One of the men whispered, almost involuntarily, "We should not be here." His voice cracked, and it was the only sound in that vast chamber besides the hiss of the torches. But curiosity outweighed fear. They began preparations to open the sarcophagus, and the silence seemed to deepen, as if the chamber itself were waiting. The chisels struck the clamps, each blow echoing like thunder in the sealed chamber. Resin cracked, stone dust billowed, and the sarcophagus lid shuddered as though resisting their intrusion. The men coughed, waving their torches to clear the air, but the dust seemed heavier than sand, thick, clinging, almost alive. One worker fell back, clutching his throat. His coughs grew harsher, his skin paling as though he'd breathed in more than just dust. The others hesitated, but the leader barked at them to continue. Curiosity, or perhaps greed, pressed the chisels forward. With a final groan of stone against stone, the lid shifted. The moment it moved, a gust of stale air burst free, sweeping across the chamber like a sigh from the grave. The torches flickered violently. The dust thickened, swirling in the patterns that seemed unnatural, forming vague shapes that dissolved before the men could focus on them. Some swore they heard whispers carried on that breath, low voices in a language older than any they knew. Inside the sarcophagus, no gilded treasures gleamed. Instead, they found a body so well preserved it seemed impossible. Skin clung to the bones, leathery and stretched, eyes sunken but intact, lips pulled back into a silent snarl. The wrappings had fused with the flesh, blackened and brittle. A strange resin pooled beneath the corpse, sticky and dark, giving off a pungent, metallic stench. The hieroglyphs carved on the inside walls glowed faintly in the torchlight, their warnings clearer now. The silence must not be broken. The coughing worker slumped to the ground, his chest heaving in shallow breaths. Another man swore he felt the ground tremble beneath them. Fear spread, but still the leader leaned over the open tomb, eyes wide with obsession. And then the dust rose again, this time moving against the breath of the men, swirling upward in deliberate spirals, as if drawn by an unseen force. The coughing man was carried out into the desert night, but by morning his body was cold. The others whispered it was the dust, that he had breathed in something meant to stay sealed forever. Yet the leader refused to turn back. Instead, he pressed deeper into the chamber, his torchlight revealing more inscriptions carved along the walls, warnings etched with almost frantic precision. The hieroglyphs spoke of a guardian, a force bound to the tomb until disturbed. One passage, translated hastily, read, "Those who awaken him shall carry his silence within their lungs." The men exchanged uneasy glances, each remembering the workers' last choking breaths. Still, they followed. Days blurred. Equipment failed. Lanterns sputtered without cause. Food spoiled quickly, and water skins seemed to grow lighter, though they swore they had been full. Men began to quarrel, their nerves fraying. Some claimed they heard footsteps trailing them in the dark, though the sand bore no mark. Others woke in the night gasping for air, as though an unseen hand pressed upon their chests. The leader wrote obsessively in his journal, his entries growing erratic. He spoke of whispers guiding his hand, and shadows that moved like smoke. At times, he seemed detached, staring at the sarcophagus for hours, lips moving soundlessly. By the end of the week, 3 more workers had died. One fell from the shaft ladder without a sound, his body twisted in the sand below. Another simply vanished, his bedroll empty at dawn. The last was found slumped beside the tomb wall, eyes wide open, mouth filled with dust. Rumors spread among the surviving workers that the tomb was not meant to be opened, that something inside now followed them. Even the desert outside seemed changed, winds howling longer, stars dimming above the dunes. And yet, against all reason, the leader remained certain. "We are close," he whispered, clutching his journal. "Closer than anyone has ever been." Weeks later, the desert swallowed the camp. Supplies rotted in the sun, tents collapsed beneath the shifting dunes, and no voices rose from the shaft where the tomb lay. The relief party, sent from Cairo after messages stopped arriving, expected to find weary men. Instead, they found silence. The shaft was half filled with sand. The rope ladder was torn, swaying in the wind as if someone had struggled to climb. At the edge of the entrance lay a satchel, its leather cracked and sun-bleached. Inside was a single possession, a journal. The entries began in a firm hand, detailing measurements, sketches, translations. Then, slowly, the writing frayed into chaos. Lines written over each other, words repeated endlessly. He waits, he watches, he breathes. In the final pages, smeared with dirt and what might have been blood, only one phrase remained, written again and again until the ink tore the page. The silence followed. The men searched for bodies, but none were found. Not the leader, not the workers, not even a trace of struggle. The sarcophagus inside the chamber was closed, untouched, but the torches were burnt to stubs and the air was heavy, as if the chamber still remembered the breath of the intruders. News of the discovery spread quickly, but so did fear. Some claimed the missing men had fled into the desert, driven mad by superstition. Others whispered they had been claimed by the curse, their lives given to whatever force the hieroglyphs had warned against. The journal was sealed away, its words too unsettling to dismiss, yet too dangerous to ignore. And in the years that followed, strange illnesses haunted those who handled it. A cough that never healed. Nights filled with dreams of sand pressing in, choking the air. The journal was eventually locked in a museum vault, hidden from the public eye. Even now, scholars debate whether the tomb was real, or whether the men had simply vanished into the endless desert. But for those who have seen the journal with their own eyes, there is no question. The silence of Saqqara still whispers.